Hey everybody, this is Hill along with Clements.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're here for a little grudge match between the Xbox 360 and PS3 RPG libraries.
I know, it's very exciting. I think we both know that the 360 will inevitably win at some point, but the PS3 still has fight left in it. But Hill, why don't you start us off?
Sure, we decided that we would go ahead and pick our the best exclusive RPG for each system and just sort of talk about that in more specific terms. So I of course picked Mass Effect. This is BioWare's RPG, only out for the Xbox 360. Mass Effect was the final proof that Western RPGs have finally surpassed JRPGs in being able to tell a great story and provide compelling gameplay, really using mechanics that have been around for the past 20 years. Yeah, probably the biggest deal was just to change the dialogue choice. You weren't just selecting from a list of lines that you want to tell back, you're really just choosing the emotion that you wanted to display, and then the game would replay it. And the best part is that this is one of the very rare RPGs where your main character actually has a voice throughout.
I think what you meant was the best part is the lesbian alien sex, which you can get yourself into through those dialogue choices.
But really the cool thing about Mass Effect 2 is just that it was all about choice. It was, choosing what your character wanted to be like, which of course is a big part of an RPG, really whether or not you wanted to see the universe saved from an imminent force of evil. And the big deal is that all of those choices are going to carry over for Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. You have an RPG that actually spans choice across 3 games, which is something we've never seen before. You don't get that on the PS3 now, do you, Ryan?
No, I guess you do not. So next up we have Valkyria Chronicles, which I think, which represents what Sony used to have in the dominance era of RPGs, which is the classic JRPG that combines unique gameplay with a heavily story-based system to create just a really rewarding experience. And what I loved about Valkyria Chronicles was that its presentation, it was all told through a storybook format. I also loved how the story was told in a way that makes you really attached to not only the characters, but their background and the nation that they come from, which is Gallia. And the combat in Valkyria Chronicles was also awesome. So it's just a really cool system in general, and I think it's a really great example of what the PS3 can do, even though it hasn't been capitalized on yet.
But let me ask you this, do they have long elevator rides in Valkyria Chronicles?
There are no long elevator rides in Valkyria Chronicles.
And I think we can agree then that Mass Effect wins.
Mass Effect wins, but only because Valkyria Chronicles is better.
Now, of course, these aren't the only exclusive RPGs on these systems, so we thought we'd briefly touch on some of the other offerings just to sort of compare those as well.
Definitely.
Now, Microsoft actually has turned the tables on Sony. The PlayStation 2 was the place to go for RPGs. That's not quite the case anymore. There's actually more RPGs and more JRPGs available on Xbox 360, and there are some really great ones. There's Lost Odyssey, for example, which I think has one of the better stories of a JRPG in a long time. You've got Fable 2, of course, which has a couple of expansion packs to it. And speaking of expansion packs, you have the Fallout 3 expansion stuff that all is coming out on 360 first. There's a lot of good stuff out there, Ryan.
Yeah, I think we can both agree that for the most part, the 360 has a better RPG library right now, which is why so many people are surprised, because that was Sony's thing back in the day, and now it is not the case. However, even though the library might be superior, I still think that the PS3 has a couple gems to its name. Even though I personally was not too into Disgaea 3, it is a super hardcore strategy game. You can sink hundreds of hours into it. Although Folklore was a little controversial around the IGN offices, I still really enjoyed it. It sort of combines a very gothic, surreal fantasy tale with the Pokemon-style collecting monsters and then using them in combat.
I like the first hour I bothered to play that game.
Yeah, there you go. Also, I do have to bring up one particular game. Eternal Sonata came out on the 360 first. Not only were there new characters and costumes added to the PS3 version, which is standard stuff for a multi-platform game, they added a few extremely important story segments that were just completely missing from the 360 version. It just made a lot more sense, it tied up a lot of loose ends, and overall it was just a far superior game on the PS3.
I think that pretty much closes the argument when one of your games has to be a game that had already been out on the 360.
So I think Hill and I are both in agreement. 360 has this one right now. However, I would like to point out to the listeners that the PS3, there's still some really good potential stuff coming down the line. White Knight Chronicles is an exclusive that's coming. We just heard that Final Fantasy XIV, an online game, is going to be coming to the PS3. And also Final Fantasy Versus 13, for now, is exclusive. Not the proper 13 installment, but the action RPG version, which also looks really promising. So down the line, possibly the PS3 can start to live up to its tradition.
Plus, if Microsoft holds form, they will not be having any new MMOs, whereas you guys will get DC Universe Online, of course, Final Fantasy 14. So there's definitely a lot of potential. Really the only big RPGs that we know of in the future are going to be Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, and, there's not really been much secret kept on the fact that Fable 3 is in the works, but otherwise, we're kind of in the dark about what else is coming, so there's definitely some promising stuff for PS3, but for right now, the 360 is certainly kicking its ass.
Well, in the future, perhaps things will change, but for now, we'll bow out to 360 and pray for PS3. Thank you very much, Hill.
So that's all the time we have for today, but why don't you guys go ahead and check out IGN.com where you can read even more in-depth stuff about our RPG Grudge match battle.